All right, only a few more minutes and then we will start. Anyone coming? No? All right, so good morning, everyone, and welcome to this breakfast talk here at LUSEM and also online from different parts of the world joining in. My name is Sara Sari, and I'm the Alumni Coordinator here at LUSEM. And together with my colleagues, Martina Oxling from Sustainable Future Hub, Camilla Nilsson from Faculty of Engineering, and Malin Åkerskog, Communication Officer for External Relations here at LUSEM, we have organized this event in collaboration with Thomas Kalling over here, and to present the Sustainable Urban Mobility Program, a project that is a part of Sparbanken Skåne's Center for Sustainable Enterprising, SEN, which is financed through a generous donation from Sparbanksstiftelsen Finn, owner of Sparbanken Skåne. And together we all will learn a bit more about transformation towards sustainable collective mobility in cities and regions, and what that would entail through the perspectives of our invited speakers here today. And Thomas Kalling is our strategy professor here at LUSEM. We have also Anders Wretstrand, public transport strategist at Skånetrafiken and associate professor at the Department of Technology and Society at LTH. Jonas Selén, marketing director at Ericsson, and last but not least, Sara Bengtsson, head of collaborations at Planethon and founder of Money Meet Souls. After the presentation, we will have a Q&A, so make sure to have some questions ready. And as you can see, we have a photographer here and over there. If you don't want your pictures taken, just talk to my colleague Daniel over here. He's really tall, so you can't miss him, and just let him know. So without further ado, I give the word to Thomas Kalling.
On as well. I hope you can hear me now. Right. Yeah, everyone can hear me. Okay. Good morning and welcome. And I'm glad we have such a great turnout here today. And I hope we can have some interesting conversations. I can see that all my students are here without exceptions, I think, who are part of the Sustainable Urban Mobility Program that we've just initiated. That's nice to see. The reason that the reason we have an interest in this, in my case, is actually to set the stage here a little bit. Is that we've been having a lot of research collaborations with Skånetrafiken, the public transport company here in this region, and we have one project in connection with them where we look into the future of public transport, or public and collective mobility, as it is referred to nowadays. And when, as a strategy researcher, when you discuss these things together with a public transport company such as Skånetrafiken, who is very much representative of these kinds of public transport companies in our part of the world, it's quite clear that it's a challenge to get the trains and buses and trams to run on time. We appreciate and we have a lot of respect for that challenge. But on top of that challenge, there's also nowadays the fact that you end up in conversations about entire cities. It's not just about buses and train stations and stuff. It's also about pedestrian pathways, parking spaces, and even aesthetical aspects of urban planning and how we build cities. So we realize, well, you told me, and I've eventually come to realize that we're talking about here is how we build and construct a livable city, where it's and adjacent regions, of course, and how we make it easy and safe to move between work, home, and whatever we do on our spare time. And in order for this to work out, it's not just like sort of making chocolate bars or furniture or whatever. This is complex questions and complex areas involving a lot of different stakeholders and different actors in the systems. It's policy, it's government, it's private sector, NGOs, and it also involves citizens. And as a strategy researcher, I find this tremendously interesting. It's not the first time that we've tried to make cities livable. This is, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the architect Le Corbusier once in 1935 had a suggestion of how to sort of develop Paris. And for those of you who know the map of Paris, you can tell that there is some drastic changes here and proposals from our dear Corbusier. And I think it's a couple of 20 or 30-story skyscrapers there, right on top of what is Hallarna, Les Halles. So this would have been a sort of a major event if this would have happened. But if you look at the ambitions of the so-called Radiant City, I mean, the ambitions are not that unlike where we are today, right? Efficient communication networks to ensure the enlarged vast areas of greenery throughout the city, increase access to sun, and reduce urban traffic. If you look into some of the more progressive cities around the world, they more or less echo these ambitions. Division of spaces between vehicles and pedestrians, importance of having an exceptional well-connected public transport system to communicate the different areas that make up this idea. 1935, it's 90 years ago, and we're still working on these things. And as I said, these ambitions are not that different from progressive cities today. The main difference here, I would argue, is that we have internet nowadays, and everything that comes with it. So anyway, in my book, these kinds of changes and suggestions and ideas are important to understand. And as Sara said here initially, we've now started under the auspices of the SEN, which is the Center for Enterprising here at the school that is funded by Sparbanken Finn. We want to have a look into this. We're not the first group of researchers to look into this. We have a fantastic research institute here in Lund called K2, who work with these things, and public transport and how we build these kinds of cities is a subject on many different curricula around the world. Our take, as I said, will be to look into this from a strategy perspective, and I think that business model changes in the context of a wide variety of stakeholders and a lot of technological uncertainty is sort of the main focus of our research. It's not the first time since, it's not that we're in a unique situation, historically speaking. We've had these kinds of problems in the past. I think this is Los Angeles or Chicago or something like that, 1920s. Busy stuff that need to be controlled. And the thing with this is that you can't really, you can view it as a project, but the thing is that they never end. We will continue to have these discussions about how we build these livable cities, as long as we have cities, I would have thought. But anyway, what we're looking into here, there's a plethora of different challenges and problems that you might want to look into here. Regional and urban planning, architecture, public transport operators, real estate development, technological development, as we said. Financing, this is not, typically here, if you invest in something here, it's supposed to have a sort of a life cycle of at least, we're planning at least, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years. So financing is obviously an important issue here as well. Platforms and how we develop platforms and services on those platforms is another strategic challenge where we were hoping to see some interesting decision making and implementations. And as I said, research-wise, stakeholder management, how do we build these ecosystems? How do we manage the tech shifts? How do we make decisions about standards in these contexts? And again, bearing in mind that we were talking about really complex situations or environments here. Policy and political leadership, this is not something that will resolve itself through pure private entrepreneurship. There is definitely, and for sure, it requires also a bit of entrepreneurial with entrepreneurial politics as well, and risk takers and bold decisions from the policy level as well. What you see here is that might be something that is familiar to you. Mobility as a service, which is just one little slice of all this, where we actually try to develop solutions, which means where that where you can buy tickets and transportation through one provider, one app, which you think might be an easy task, but which has proven itself to be ridiculously complex. And it's not like just providing or setting up an Airbnb kind of solution to things. It's far more complex than that. Still, some projections here when it comes to mobility as a service. We're talking in the region of CAGR in the region of 30% per year, which is also some sort of indication of that that things are happening in this area. So we have all these different challenges to deal with, and as I state here, it doesn't really hurt if it's beautiful as well. And this is at the train station in Antwerp, I believe, and kind of a nice reminder that if we really want to build something that is extensionally sustainable, it has to be beautiful as well, which is further evidence that we need sort of a broad approach here. And that we cannot let one kind of profession take full responsibility for the whole development. Yeah, this is the way we're going to work. As I said, there's a couple of students here so far, and of course we're using our master students to help us with mapping the world around us. The way we approach this now initially from our side is that we collect a series of case studies of progressive and interesting cities and regions around the world. And you actually see a picture here that you might recognize, Andrea, which is a little town in Spain that might be unknown to us, called Pontevedra, which decided already in the 90s to develop a car-free inner city. And you can imagine the debate and conflicts that stirred because it was the 90s, but it's proven to be a huge success. Population has increased and business has increased as well, and they've done this with a great deal of success, a car-free inner city, and that's what we're trying to do now to conduct and collect a series of case studies of good and possibly bad examples as well throughout the world. So that's what we're doing, and that is what our students are working with at the moment here as well. Well, I'm not so surprised, but it hasn't been any problem to attract interest from different industrial players. And here you see some of the companies that have sort of raised their hand and wanted to partake in this. And we're going to be even more in the future, of course. But these are all companies, and some of them are represented here today, that have an interest in these things and who are willing and sort of believe in the purpose of developing sustainable cities, and cities that are sustainable not only in terms of energy and ecology, but also socially and of course financially. So that is the ambition of our research program. It's early stages, and if anyone here in this room, feels an urge to partake, just let us know. Consider this whole thing to be an invitation for future collaboration. Yep, I'm going to stop there, and I guess we will take questions. This is just an introduction. We will have a debate afterwards where we can discuss these things a little bit more. Thank you.
Torren. Oh, looks good. Thank you, Sara and Thomas, for inviting me to this event. Apologies for my rough voice. The mic is necessary today. I'll try to pitch the concept of sustainable accessibility, arguing that it might be the number one transport policy issue during the years to come. And we'll see how this pitch goes. You often talk about sustainable mobility, It's measured by level of service, number of trips, travel time, mean speed. However, today, most academics emphasize accessibility instead. The potential to move around. Accessibility is the ease with which people can reach places and opportunities, or a characteristic of a place and opportunities in terms of how easily they can be reached. Accessibility conditions are influenced both by the spatial distribution of the population, economic activities, public services, as well as by the configuration and performance of the transport network. So I'm taking a slightly sort of academic stance here today, although I would say I'm 99.9% working at the agency and 0.1% working at the faculty. So I take the opportunity to be a bit academic. However, more and more accessibility for all of us comes at a cost. There's always costs connected to benefits. Planners and transport strategists like me and my colleagues at Skånetrafiken, we deal with trade-offs about striking the right balance. So planning for sustainable accessibility is all about which destinations you should increase access to, for whom and for which groups better access is needed. Let's say the efficient and fair distribution of accessibility, and which modes to prioritize. Such prioritization is purely political, I would say, and planners need to provide solid grounds for political decision-making. Such grounds are often based on empirical research. The transport sector globally is the largest consumer of oil, and to reach the Sustainable Development Goals, it's important to decarbonize the transport sector and invest in sustainable technologies. But decarbonizing individual private transport is not enough. Our new electric vehicles will still consume more energy per kilometer than buses, trams and trains. Only a reduction policy for car journeys will reduce pollution, health risks and global greenhouse gas emissions. So this calls for economic as well as administrative policy instruments. If we truly strive for what we are talking about now, transport-efficient societies, we must develop and design cities and regions in ways that fight sprawl and creates local densities. Only integrated and informed approaches to land use and transport planning can help reaching the goals of sustainable, livable, as Thomas mentioned, healthy and inclusive cities and regions. Okay, space and place are scarce entities. When rethinking the streetscape, we could align allocation with space with a mobility policy in place. The reallocation of public space to slow modes like public transport, cycling, or walking improves mobility efficiency. However, beware. New types of disruptive services and modes are lurking around the corner, such as autonomous vehicle, and they might have anticipated negative effects if solely left to market forces. Less car infrastructure allows for placemaking, desirable density. It's good for the economy, it's good for and improves the quality of life, and it enhances social inclusion. Here is another graphic stolen from the UITP Urban Mobility Playbook, emphasizing active traveling as a health policy. Getting out of the private car improves our health, which also has a positive budget effect on a regional level. This is hopefully a good argument for us at Skånetrafiken when competing for regional public funding. So, what's next? What about the future then? Are there promising initiatives in pipeline? Linked to K2, the National Center for Research and Education on Public Transport, Rådslaget has been launched. It's a sort of council team, dozens of experts and practitioners join in. It's an initiative for the renewal of public transport. It stems from the challenges faced during the pandemic and the window of opportunity that has opened at the time in order to challenge old truths and explore new perspectives. 5 thematic areas were defined during the launch of Rådslaget. A redefined role for public transport. What should be the public service obligation in a more wide sense? Changes in financing and responsibility, pricing and payment issues, privatization of streetscape, and finally integration. Integrated services with public transport as a backbone in the light of changing life and working styles. And here, within these 5 areas, we have the issue that I think you will talk about from the high-tech perspective. Connected vehicles connected to infrastructure, the way we deal with new technology in order to solve future challenges. Summing up, I think I will try to argue for this concept of sustainable accessibility. How do we address it on a local and regional scale? I put the number 1, 2, 3. It's not that really that order, but to address one issue first. Innovative and efficient public transport systems. It's about accessibility and inclusiveness, the quality of the system, the attractiveness of the system, multimodal alternatives, integrated mobility, new solution, and mobilities as a services that Thomas mentioned. Mobility hubs in cities, places where you can sort of allocate different resources and open up for market initiatives where you concentrate supply. That could be done also in smaller towns and small villages. It will be a guidance for us at Skånetrafiken, for instance, to allocate our resources together with municipalities to actually point out this is where we want to allocate our resources. It also sends a signal for the Swedish Transport Authority, who sort of manages the infrastructure outside cities. These hubs should then foster local access and proximity, clean energy modes, cloud-based data, urban and regional analytics. As an example, we have support from small overseas startup companies that can access our data in real time and support us with decisions on how to be more punctual and reliable. Second, through optimized road and street management in order to create a safe and secure environment, space regulation through policy instruments, active mobility, private car charges, parking policies. And thirdly, through citizen-centered participatory design around public transport and active mobility and design of cities as a whole. I liked your slide about Corbusier. We had our Corbusier moment in Lund. I don't know if you can recall genombrottet. It was a plan to really be a very efficient road through the city center. We actually discussed that a couple of weeks ago when we were thinking about the new public transport network in Lund. We would probably have benefited if we could have a sort of an east-west axis where we could operate buses with high level of services. But hopefully that didn't happen. Okay. Novel public governance and planning. Densification, mobility regulation, funding, pricing, and not least affordability. We have, as some of you know, raised ticket prices substantially lately. That's a way of following a rule where we sort of link the ticket prices to consumer price index. So it's formally it's a correct decision by the policymakers and politicians, but then you could argue, is it a way of sort of targeting sustainable urban mobility and sustainable accessibility in the long run? Other countries and other regions might think otherwise. And finally, it's about value creation, I think, in order to achieve real public value through the transport and land use systems. Future-oriented responsibility linked to upcoming accountability in terms of climate change. And to achieve this, political courage and informed organizations are required. Thank you.
Oh, slow response. Good morning, everyone. We're getting there. Oh, clicker. So, good morning. My name is Jonas Selén. I work at Ericsson, and formerly I work at Ericsson Group, that is in Stockholm. So I have the opportunity to oversee a lot of different technologies, work with people who are deeply into artificial intelligence, all over to people who handle our social media accounts. So it's a wide variety of people that I interact with. And today I would like to give you a quick snapshot of what is Ericsson, what do we do. It's been a while. I was actually hired among the last ones when we did mobile handsets, which is 23 years ago. So I started my career in engineering. Well, I'm a sociologist by training, so I have no clue about radio technology, they say, but I do, you learn. What Ericsson does, sort of 70% of our turnover comes from those white boxes you see there. Among other things, there is a product development unit for those boxes here in Lund, up there. Some 700-800 people who are really good at shrinking things, which is a key thing for us, because when you shrink things, you use less energy and you diminish weight, which is key factor. So those antennas you see up there, that's Ericsson products. That's what we sell. We have a turnover of 278 billion SEK, a lot of money. And that's radio access. That's our key thing. That's what we do. That's 3G, 4G, 5G, 6G for you guys. Then we also do the links between the radio base stations. That's transport. We do 5G core, which is the brain of the network, the most complex thing there ever was. That's where we use a lot of AI. And then we have different support services. And the latest addition is an expansion into the enterprise space. Now roughly 10% of our turnover, which is a quite big change. 3-4 years ago, it was 1%. And there is a reason for why we want to invest in enterprise-related things that I will come back to at the end of the presentation, because we are strong believers in eating our own dog shit, if you like, because we see a great opportunity for sustainability in relation to the enterprise sector, to the extent that we invest ourselves to be part of that enterprise development. So that's why we have those things over there with private networks, wireless WAN. WAN is wide area networks. Mission critical is all the blue lights and also a bit of the societal things that you mentioned here earlier. And enterprise service orchestration is part of all of this. How do you handle all of this? So Ericsson today is 105,000 people. We spend 47 billion SEK in R&D. That's almost 20% of our turnover. We have something, if I remember correctly, 29,000 people employed in R&D. Those numbers are impressive if you put it into context, because we spend twice as much as a normal pharmaceutical company does on R&D. R&D is at the core. It gives us a little bit of a techie feel, yes, but that's what we need to be, and we want to be. We want to be techie. This is the only way we can keep up with the competition from our Chinese competitors, our American competitors, our Finnish competitors, and so forth. Because make no mistake, this is a global game. A very, very global game. It's all about scale. The bigger you are, the cheaper it gets to produce your products. It's all about scale. It's all about cutting edge technology competition. Relentless one. So we have some 60,000 patents. It normally brings us about 10 to 15 billion SEK in annual profit to own those patents. So it's a big source of income, but it's also primarily our competitive edge is in the patent business. So when we look at the sustainability, and I'm sorry for the colors, it's not supposed to be purple. That's actually one of our customers' colors. T-Mobile, they normally do the purple, or Deutsche Telekom. So when we look at sustainability, we look at it from 4 different perspectives. We have the first one, which is our own activities. That's what we are primarily responsible for. And there we have a very ambitious target of getting into net zero in 2030, which is 6 years ahead from today. And I think that's achievable, because when you push the sustainability agenda, you also push the efficiency agenda, and you push a number of, let's say, financially interesting objectives. So that's all good. Then we need to push our supply chain, the people that delivers to us. That is a trickier task, because even if we are big, we can't mandate what others do. We can try to find other suppliers, but sometimes it's not possible. It is simply not possible, and then you have a choice. And sometimes you can't jeopardize the entire business you have to make some choices. But we can push and push and push, and we do that a lot. So we're talking about halving the emissions from our supply chain by 2030, which is in line with the global ambition and the European ambition. But we can't put a net zero goal because it's not our companies. Now, from a portfolio perspective, that is all of those radios that you saw there. Let me give you an example, and that's why the site in Lund is so important and the shrinking. One of our customers, Vodafone in UK, or Vodafone is a global company really, they have managed to decrease the energy consumption with some 30 to 40%, whilst tripling the data. That is the number of bits going through the networks. So this means we provide more and more efficient and lighter equipment to our customers, which are 2 times 20, 30, 40, 50% more efficient than the previous generation. And we do this every second year. So it's an enormous pressure on electricity or energy consumption and data efficiency. Because you guys as consumers, you use twice or you double your data consumption every second year. It's like we would double the traffic in the cities every second year. But we do it with less and less energy. So, if we look into the industries and society, so the telecoms industry represents about 1.5% of the total energy consumption. But the impact of digitalization, if we do it across all the sectors, could be 15% emission cut, which means that a third of the goal of halving could be achieved by digitalization of industries and so forth. And that's why we are so interested in the enterprise space. So when enterprises get into this space of digitalization, they do it for a number of reasons, and those reasons may vary across the different verticals. But it is, if you look into manufacturing, it's all about agility. It's about being able to change the production lines without having to draw a lot of wires everywhere. That costs money, costs downtime. You don't want that. It also looks into how do I advance my operations? How do I become smarter in the planning and execution of my business? Which you alluded to when you use your startups and all of that through cloud services. AI is a big, big thing in this. In order to make it work, you need sensors everywhere. Everything needs to become digitalized so that you can get to something, an end state that we refer to as a digital twin of your operations. And this is a big thing when we look into, let's say, 5G Advanced, which is end of this century, end of the 20s, and in 2030 and onwards, we're talking about 6G. That's all about digital twins, building a digital replica of everything. With that, you can map everything in real time. You can predict what's going to happen, but also, even more interestingly, and a little bit scary, you can run the physical world through your digital twin. So, that's what you do when you unlock intelligence. So I mentioned that we are growing fast. If I remember all the data points here, so in 2023 we will use 19 gigabytes of data per user. When we introduced 5G in 2018, the average was about 2 to 3 gigabytes, and it's 19 now. We estimate that it will be 50 in 2027, 2028. That's a lot of growth. And as our CEO referred to yesterday when the Q reports came, we are very confident that our customers will need to buy more stuff from us because data consumption is going through the roof. And it's going, and it's going, and it's going. So 5G, which was introduced in US and Korea in 2018, will cover some 5 billion people in 2028. There is about 8 billion people in total on the world, and it's the fastest growing technology to date. It goes really, really, really fast. There is something called fixed wireless access, which is a big thing in America because it's a big country from a space perspective. Fixed wireless access, it means. It basically is fiber in the air. So instead of putting fiber in every household, you put up a radio and then you beam in very high speeds directly to the household because it is very expensive to dig for fiber. So for instance, when Telia introduced 4G 10 years ago in Sweden, 90% of that cost was relating to fiber construction work. It is very expensive. So with fixed wireless access, just imagine what you can do in places like Indonesia or India. There is no money to dig fiber everywhere, but you can do fixed wireless access. Works really neat on 5G in particular. So I touched upon this. Yes, it's hard to read, isn't it? Well, it works for you guys? It's a lot of data points. We are currently in the midst of 5G rollout. We are about 1/3 into it. Then we come into something interesting called 5G Advanced, which is faster, better, bigger, better, just even more. To give you an example, 5G is 10 times faster than 4G, and 6G could be up to another 10 times faster, or even 100 times faster. We're talking about going from 200 megabits to 2 gigs and up to, the sky is the limit. No, the spectrum is the limit. Radio and physics is the limits. But we are pushing and pushing and pushing and pushing in order to keep up with your need for TikTok cat videos. So that's societal usage. So what we need to do now differently than we have done before when we introduced every single G that comes every 10th year through a UN organization called ITU, we need to learn what works, what doesn't learn, because we are now with 5G and 5G Advanced so far ahead so that we need to learn what not to do and what to do when it comes to 6G that aims to be launched sometime 2030. The Koreans will certainly launch it in 2028 because that's normally what they do. Because the government wants things to happen in Korea, unlike some other countries. So the next 10 years, we got a very, very exciting future ahead of us when it comes to how to use ICT and telecoms for change of a society, for change of how we produce things, how we consume things, because it gives us enormous opportunities to change. And then in 2030 something, when we talk about 6G, we're going cyber, really. That's when we come to this digital twin setup. That's when every house, everything you see around you will have a sensor that sends data to the networks so that you can build a digital twin of it. And then rule the physical world through the digital twin. Then you can control things. Then you can control temperatures and turn off batteries and set on and all of that, and you can get really energy efficient. But we can do a lot of things before this, and that's what it's all about. But I wanted to show you a video to give you a little glimpse of what can come in 2035 something. That's what we're aiming for. So what can we do now? So we all know that we need to cut our carbon emissions by half until 2030. And as I said earlier, 1.4% of the energy or the emissions used comes from telecoms industries, all the service providers, the Telias, the Vodafones, the Deutsche Telecoms and Bhartis of the world. Potentially, they can help with 15% reduction of greenhouse gas emissions up to 2030. There's a huge potential, but it will come through digitalization of industries. And when you look at these industries, the tough one to handle is manufacturing, because factories take a long time. They have a long shelf life, if we put it that way. You don't just demolish them and build new ones. It takes 10 to 15 years to change an industrial sector because of all the investments already in there. So if we want to move really fast, there is a number of other businesses that we can address, which is smart transport, smart buildings, smart grids. The way we transport energy is one of the key things. If you look into Sweden, we all know who paid electricity bills during the winter in the south, what the cost of energy is, because it's a long way from the northern parts of Sweden and we can't transmit the energy. So there is a lot of these grids across Europe, across Asia, across US that are in a terrible state. So we lose so much energy by transporting energy. That's a major opportunity. The transportation sector is a major opportunity short term. So is smart agriculture, a really big opportunity for digitalization. Now, you don't need 5G to digitalize all of these industries. You can do a lot with 4G, you can do a lot with existing technologies, but 5G, AI, edge compute, and all of these things can do even more. Because when these calculations are made, and you know this as well, you have to be really careful. You have to rely on data from the past. The environmental people and the sustainability people, they don't like dynamic effects. They want to be rock solid in their calculations. So they can't build their case based on a technology that isn't implemented yet because it doesn't show in the data. And we are all looking forward. So we say the next 10 years, there's a great opportunity to do more than the 15% by using AI, by using 5G, by using cloud, IoT, all of those technologies that weren't available earlier, but it is at your hands and at your fingertips right now. So on that positive note, thank you.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, everyone, we've been sitting down for quite a bit now. We're all halfway through this seminar, so can we all just stand up? I know it's morning, so everyone is, get some energy back in there. So let's turn around, look at the cameras back there. And then turn back around to me again. All right, you can sit down now. So, I'm here today to talk about the wild city. Now, my name is Sarah Bengtsson. I'm the head of collaboration of Planethon, and I'm also the founder of Money Meets Soul. So my background is in sustainable investing. I worked with some of the largest asset managers here in Sweden, but lately now I work actually with how we change organizations from the inside. But way before that, I was a student here. I have my master in economics from this school. So I've sat in the seats, just like you are right now, looking at other people talking about what the future should be like. But I could never have imagined, when I graduated 8 years ago, that the world would look like the way it looks like today. I couldn't have imagined all of the political crises and increasing volatility happening in the world. I could not have imagined what Jonas brought up with the energy crisis, that we'd be paying a fortune just for heating up our houses during winter. And I would not have imagined, what more do we have? Well, that we're still approving new oil and gas projects in 2023. Well, on the other side, I would also not have been able to imagine that me personally would be looking out over this, beautiful horizon with massive wind turbines covering the view and say, whoa, that looks beautiful. That's a gorgeous view. Or that some of the major banks in the world today, they're divesting from fossil fuels. People are taking stances against fossil fuel projects. And I also would not have been able to imagine that driving through the narrow roads of Norway, I would be seeing Tesla charging stations absolutely everywhere. And that's just it, though. I will be talking about the imagination today, and why we believe that that's one of the most undervalued skills in sustainability. And I hope that by the end of this, you'll agree with me. But first of all, what is Planethon? And what do we do at Planethon? Whoa, all right, yeah, the colors. Here we go. We like the pink. What we do is that we like to say that we are a transformation partner for the future. Because when we look at how sustainability works today, around 4,000 organizations from all around the world, they've said, okay, we're going to be net zero by 2030. Very few of them has actually taken the steps that are necessary to even start to get to that point. Why is that? Well, around 70% of change management projects within organizations fail today. So if I would want to add one more factor to this challenges list that Thomas Kalling mentioned earlier, I would say, well, the human factor is one. So what we like to do, we use the most recent climate science. What does the science say today about the world we might look and live in 20, 30, 50 years from now? And then we combine that with storytelling. Immersive experiences like the video we just saw or the visualization that we're going to do here in a second, just so that we as humans start to relate to the future that we should build towards. Because that is how we start to work towards the strategy. We need to combine that with the strategies. So without any further ado, we're going to jump 50 years into the future. And thank you, Sarah. She's going to help me set this up, because I want to just talk a little bit about this project that we did together with Spotify last year. We at Planethon, we laid the scientific groundwork for this audio novel, so we're going to listen to the part of the wild city today. So we laid the foundational futures scenarios that these were based on, and then this was written by Tuva Novotny and narrated by Edin Edvin Ryding. And it takes place 50 years from now, and just the premise of this is that we as a society, we decided that we're going to split the cities from the wild nature. So we have the wild cities and the wild nature to help nature regenerate itself. And this was part of changing kind of the narrative, the doomsday narrative that's out there when it comes to the climate crisis. So I invite you now, again, to close your eyes and just take a deep breath. We're going to jump into this visualization. Now, I want, yeah, there we go.
In any case, Mom wants to get out there. It's as if
Nope. No, we don't have to see it on the screen.
what we mean by wild just isn't wild enough for her. My memories of wild nature look pretty much the same as what I live in today, even though it's now a wild city. What used to be endless lanes of cars and trucks and motorcycles and brick and concrete is now green. Crowds of people, embrace the smell of fresh air instead of exhaust fumes. Amazing how fast the world transformed. My childhood was filled with the smell of diesel and the sound of engines. Although I guess a lot of the new wave of urban planning was already trying to green the cities when I was a kid. I just didn't see it back then. A couple of generations later, and those planted trees really did transform urban DNA all across the world. Amazing that I find myself waking up to the sound of the blackbird and the smell of grass. I can literally reach outside my kitchen window and pick my own herbs, and get homegrown veggies from the local farm down the block. The definition of living with nature, according to my mom. It's not just compatible with Mom's definition of wild. So, she wants to go. Like, not just visit, but rather camp out. Or even more aesthetically, I'm sure what she really wants is just a sleeping bag right under the stars.
All right, and before we coming back into the room here, I invite you to be a little curious about how you're feeling right now. Maybe you have a lot of thoughts racing, conflicting emotions, that's fine, but see if you can just narrow it down to one. And then as you come back out in here, you open your eyes and share that one word with that person next to you. How did it make you feel? That is exactly why we do what we do. Because strategy alone, great plans, new technologies, they don't fuel action. Feelings do. Especially feelings that are nurtured or fueled by emotional narratives and imagination. So for the next now, I don't know how much time I have left, 5-10 minutes, I will be trying to convince you about why imagination is the one crucial skill for sustainable innovation here going forward. And the first reason is that we cannot build towards a future we can't relate to. And we can't relate to a future that we can't imagine. Now, bringing this back to, basic economic theory of discounting future gains, we know that we don't really value things that are about to happen in the future. We value the dollar that we can get today way more than the $100 that we can get the years from now. You might say, but Sarah, that's just about money. But that's about us too. Because we relate. I'm going to see if we can see this slide here. All right. Now we're talking about real sci-fi, even in the photos here. But okay, we can't relate to our future selves. The text that's in white there, that you can't really see, that says, refers to a study that says that when we relate to our future self, we relate as well as we would see a stranger on the street. That's why we don't save for retirement. We're really bad at that. So there was this study made in the US where they were looking at that. Okay, how can you get more people to save for retirement? They used this hypothesis, and then they said, well, what if we can visualize, we can have people see what they will look like 20, 30 years from now when they retire? Will that make them save for retirement more. And that's that image there. Today, that has taken flight. Now, it's been face app. You can see these filters everywhere on social media. But it started with this research study in the US. And spoiler alert, it's true. If we can see our future self, visualize what we look like a few years in the future, we will save more for retirement. And this is exactly why we apply the same thinking to the world. So if we can visualize what the world will look like 30 years in the future, we will actually take action to achieving those goals. And we do that by imagination. All right, the second reason is that if there is one thing that we know for certain about the future, it is that we cannot know anything for certain. Has any one of you ever done anything that's physically hard, like running a marathon or Vasaloppet or anything like that? Because you know that when you get to that point that things get really hard, what you start to do is just think, you go into yourself and you think, okay, one step at a time, one step at a time, one step at a time. That's exactly what organizations in the world are doing right now. Because we live in something that's called the VUCA world. You probably heard about it. It's volatile, uncertain, complex, and ambiguous. So companies are building their strategies looking 1 or 2 years ahead. That's it. But with imagination, by using imagination, oh, I'm just gonna, all right, 52, you can see 52 there. What it really says here is that the Fortune 500 companies that were alive or thriving 20 years ago, the 500 largest companies in the world, 52% of them do not exist anymore because of this. That's why we need to lift the gaze, and we do that with the help of imagination. The second reason, it's not just about how we do things. It's about the why. So we step a little bit closer here into humanness again. And Jonas, you put up a really interesting statistic. I'm just going to read from what I wrote, that you said, it said that digitalization can potentially enable a 15% reduction in global emissions by 2030. Digitalization, bringing things online. Instead of thinking about like how can we do things more efficiently? How can we make driving more efficient by using electric vehicles? We can start thinking about, why do we drive in the first place? Why are we as humans moving in the first place? And another statistic, all you're going to remember now is the numbers, because the numbers are the only thing you can see. But if we move the meetings, this is conferences, from being online in person to offline, we reduce the carbon footprint of the conference with 94% and energy use by 90%. So I'm going to make a very, very bold statement here, and you can take it with a grain of salt because we're in academia now. And that is that a company like Zoom might actually, potentially, maybe have done more for reducing global emissions than the entire fleet of electric vehicles today. Right. That's a bold statement. So, given all of this, everything that we talked about today, the people before me, all the ideas that we have in here, in the new program that's being built out, 5G, 6G, digitalization, accessibility, whatever it might be, all these innovations, what needs to happen now is that we weave them into emotional narratives fueled by imagination, because that is what it takes to create bold action. So I'll leave you with this one. The climate crisis, as it stands today, is actually a crisis of imagination. That's it for me. Thank you.
Thank you very much to all three of you for very inspiring presentations. We have a couple of questions, and I think we're going to have a little bit of a panel now, so please stand up again, all three of you. And we will leave room for questions from the audience, of course, but I think could perhaps throw in a couple of easy volleys for you to start with. I had one question. You mentioned the Le Corbusier moment, and I think the one we had in Lund was It wasn't by Le Corbusier himself, but I think the idea was to have the E22 motorway run right through the city, right? Along Södergatan, Kyrkogatan, just outside the cathedral. That was the initial idea, you know, because the fastest way to get around Lund. But I guess that was one visionary moment where perhaps it was good that someone said no in the end. But on that topic, and in the experience of the three of you, where do we see these potential visionaries, these people who are able to imagine? Do you have any good examples of people, organizations, places, or anything like that, where we see examples of, you know, bold statements and visions for the future? No.
I think there is one notion, and one thing we don't lack is bold statements. That's
Statements,
easy.
okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's easy.
No.
The tough thing is to execute on them.
Yeah.
That's way harder. I mean, yeah, we use the same techniques as you guys. We do scenarios and all of that. We have to plan at Ericsson 10, 15 years ahead.
Yeah.
And we do a lot of these, let's say, visualizations, because that's the way to make it tangible for people. Because the majority of people in the world don't have any imagination. Most people are not creative. It's just a fact. So when we ask consumers what they want to do going ahead, they don't know, because it hasn't been invented yet. So doing these scenarios and all of these things and working with a wide audience or a wide set of partners is really important, because no one sits with the right answer. So you need to challenge yourself. You need to take in, you know, could be students, it could be consultancy firms, it could be academics, it could be partners in the value chain, outside the value chain, to meet and have those clashes. And that's my fear today, is that we are becoming a society where we don't like different opinions. That's my real fear. Because in that debate and that discussion, that's where the magic happens. So I think go wide, go different, allow for discussion and debate, and then, you know, build your own picture.
Yeah. Anything else on that note from anyone?
Well, I come from the public sector.
Yeah.
I was emphasizing the political courage
Yeah.
that's needed. But we live in a democracy, and we need to take in different aspects. I was mentioning pricing of cars, for instance. I was at a conference a couple of years ago, and Singapore, they're very sort of forward-thinking in terms of mobility systems and like that, and they also have congestion charging. And I asked my neighbor, what about when you introduced this sort of congestion charging? Were there any debates? Were there public opinion? He just looked at me and said, what are you talking about? So they have a system that such initiatives works. We need to take account from different perspectives.
Yeah.
Car users who like their cars and who think they need their cars for different purposes. I have an example where politicians have sort of got together and they meet together that in a PAC, Political Advisory Committee of the Civitas initiatives. So cities across Europe working together and developing new cases and stuff like that. So you have a political board that actually sort of get inspired by another and also think, okay, I want to do this. So leaders need fora where they can sort of meet on and get inspired from different perspectives and angles. So I think that's important, political courage.
I would want to add as well that When we talk about innovative companies, what we actually talk about is the people working within those companies. Sure, you can have a company culture that is innovation or that you want to be like drive innovation in companies, but it's always the people working within that company that are doing the heavy lifting. There's no, as we know, for example, AI today, they can't do creative tasks. You can't innovate things that don't already exist. That's why we need to focus on those skills as well if we want to work well together with technology going forward. And I think that you can see that in most companies, and it's a little bit of a danger for a company to be. We have one person who drives all the innovation that we have, like Steve Jobs in Apple. What happens when he's no longer around? So if this is a skill that we all can nurture, and we all nurture, then I think that we have a pretty bright future ahead of us.
Thank you. I have one question in relation to this before we leave it to the audience, and that is, you know, if we look back at other challenges that has faced humanity, you know, if we go back in you know, in at least in recent times, could it be that the challenges we see now in connection to sustainability and particularly, you know, CO2 and ecological sustainability, that the payback, you know, to use a word that people know around here, the payback time is so long that it might be difficult to muster the imagination that you talked about, Sarah, that is so important, but also the political will and determination to actually do things. Could it be that that is sort of a specific particular peculiarity with sustainability compared to other challenges that we've had that could be resolved in a shorter time frame? Could that be one unique thing with this thing, and which will make it difficult? You know, what are the incentives to be productive and innovative and imaginative if the payback is going to happen long after you're gone?
That's a classical question. I mean, if you look into politics,
Yeah.
when you're young, I've been young as well. It was 50 kilos ago, but still, I also studied here. It's when everyone who's young they love change. Because you have nothing. You have everything to gain from change, because you have nothing to lose. But when you have kids and all of that stuff, you have a lot of stuff to lose. So I guess what we need to do is when we change, we need to facilitate for the change by making it smooth and easy.
Man.
You know, it's simple things like if you close down a bus line, all the store owners on that street needs to get compensation because they will die. You can just look at Södra Förstadsgatan in Malmö. It's dead because they changed the bus lines. And of course, all of those shop owners, they have a lot of things to lose. They spent their life fortune into that. And why should they pay for our desire to be more sustainable? Which you guys will benefit from. So we have to, find out a way to make it easy for the majority of people to live in sustainable ways. Or like you did when you said team, or now you use Zoom. I've spent 3 years on Teams, and it's absolutely killing me. It makes you go so depressed, you don't want to live. So there are some side effects of these things that we have to be aware of. Like in Sweden, it's if you spend more than 50% of your working time not at the company place or the office, the company will need to pay, there's a different tax regulation. So right now we have a campaign in Ericsson to get people to get back to the office because they spend too much time at home. Perhaps not the best thing for sustainability.
No.
Perhaps a good thing for teamwork and mental health and tax reasons.
No.
I don't know. But there is checks and balances with most things.
I know all about changing bus lines and removing bus stops. But the important thing here is actually to see it's not bus routes and bus stops. It's a whole fabric. It's an urban fabric. It's a regional network. You have to see the close interrelation between land use and transport system. I mean, for instance, we have a city in Skåne called Kristianstad. A couple of years ago, it was quite a vibrant inner city with lots of shops. It was pedestrianized area. You could hear Danes in Saturdays coming to do some shopping there. And suddenly the city decided to build an external shopping mall, C4, close to the E22. Now the city center is basically dead. I wouldn't say dead, but it's totally changed, and that's not sustainable because we can't operate our services to that shopping center. We can't compete with cars. Parking is free. It's very close to the entrance. You have to see
The whole picture.
whole picture.
Well,
I think that when it comes to change, we have an ability to just think that things don't change because we cannot see it. But things have always changed. Things are not the same that it was 50 years ago, and it will not be the same 50 years in the future. And when we're looking at the statistics now, in order to reach these net zero targets, we need to reskill about 1 billion people around the world. Reskill, that means that the people who are losing the jobs in the, they're losing the jobs in the changes that are happening right now. They will have jobs. They just have to change how we look at jobs as well. So I would say, for your first question was that if it's because it's a long-term look towards sustainability, why it's hard? Yes, it is why it's hard. If we're looking at just from a financial perspective, from an investment perspective, when I started in the financial industry, an investment horizon of 10 plus years was considered, that's an okay mid-term, like not long, but still not short time to look at things. Today, long-term is 3+ years.
well,
That doesn't work. Nothing is, we can't plan for a future if we can't even see further ahead than our nose. It doesn't work.
May I make one comment to
Yes.
that? And I think what you're referring to is a typical Western approach. If you look to our friends in the East, like in China or in India, 10 years is a normal planning horizon. It's a cultural thing. It's the same with this imagining the future, which is, it's culture. It's not the same if you look into other groups of population than in US, where the culture is sort of change and don't think about the future, it's all about today. But if you go to other cultures, you would see a completely different perspective. So, China has a 2050 plan. They have a 50-year plan of how they want to run the world. And the Indians also think long term. I mean, Ericsson, we have to think 15 years ahead. But it's very, very different. And I notice this now that we are investing in enterprise, for instance, and we go and we acquire American companies. The strategy is 3 years ahead. And of course, it's one language, one people. It's one. But in Europe, we have to handle, 39 countries and 500 languages? It's impossible to do a 3-year plan.
Yeah.
So I guess it's about culture as well.
yeah. And also, I mean, what I was thinking about here also, now we're talking kind of corporate life cycles and investment life cycles. What I personally sometimes feel is that we don't have any political courage either. And sort of the politicians sort of have adopted this short-termism as well sometimes. And that's, in my opinion, kind of disappointing actually. That, a lack of political determination and commitment to long-term decisions. Perhaps in the phase of public opinion sometimes. Thank you very much. Questions from the audience? Yeah, we have one up there. You can have the microphone so that we help our viewers online.
Hi. So I have a background in philosophy and economics. And I'm just wondering, since we're talking about this inability to change or the reluctancy to change, do you think it's possible to do it with democratic means?
Yeah, well,
Define democracy.
no, don't. Yeah, Anders, you reminded us that we live in a democracy. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yes, I think I mentioned participatory sort of approach. I think you have to adopt an even more sort of a bottom-up approach. Uh, um, because how do people want to create their life and their surroundings, and what's good for us? Is the city a space for car, or is it a playground for kids? So that sort of a starting point with a more sort of a local perspective, and that's something that is sort of also taking place now when we talk about the 15-minute city or the 1-minute city. It happens here, and how can the system, the strategic planning, help support such initiatives?
Anyone, Jonas?
I strongly believe that democracy is a necessity for the development of something that is desirable. And you all heard about the AI discussions and all of these things. And when I talk about digital twins and all of that, if we don't have democracy to put in the checks and balances, things can go really bad. It's a necessity. It may slow down things a year or two for all of you guys who want to change the world today, but it's way better than revolution.
So I'm not sure that we should look at the political systems as the holy grail to creating change. We've all seen probably some of the TikTok interviews. The CEO was at what do you call Supreme Court in the U.S. and had to answer insane questions where you wonder if these people actually rule the world that we live in based on how far away they seems to be from the reality that most of us live in. And I think that's also something that we start to discover, is that if we look at the changes, what's happening is, again, coming back to the humans in the organizations, because nothing happens because organizations decide to do something or the politicians decide to do something. It's the people within it that push for that change. If you look at sustainable investing, when I started, oh God, I worked with banks and financial institutions trying to get them to invest sustainably. It was hard because they said, oh, well, no one cares about that. And today, thanks to people coming and say, I want to have my pension fund divested from fossil fuels. That's why they're making the changes. So yes, democracy is the way to get there. However, free will comes. Then we have to count in the flaws of being human, and how we tend to not do what's actually in the best interest for us as well. So.
No. Thank you. I think we have another question.
A totally different topic. Jonas from Ericsson, you live off communication. You have 5G, 6G coming, fixed wire transmission, wireless transmission. But where is your Starlink? Is Ericsson not in space?
That's a really good discussion. Yes, one of our competitors put a radio base station, that's what we sell, an RBS, on the moon the other year. Great achievement. The only challenge is there's no one to call to. Unless sometimes somebody shows up to pick up an SMS. But anyhow, yes, let's put it this way. Traditionally, radio waves go horizontally, following the curve of the globe and all of that, fiber and so forth. also follow the curvation of the Earth. What we are looking into a lot right now is actually to go upwards. And the main reason for that is the mission critical services, or defense, fire departments, police, and so forth, because the increased usage of drones. So in order to control the drones, you need to have 5G coverage, let's say, in that other dimension, not only this way. And I think this is really interesting because 5G was originally designed not for people, but for things. So it was actually active political decisions that 5G should be for industrial purposes rather than consumer usage. For most consumer applications, if we skip out of XR, sort of holograms and stuff, 4G will go a long way. But for industrial applications and for mission critical, you need 5G because of security, reliability, speeds, and so forth. Yes, we're into, I wouldn't say space, that's that's too far away, but higher up.
Okay. Thank you. Sara, you're in charge. Do we have one potential question? Can we take that? Okay. Okay. Over here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm Johnny, and I graduated half a century ago from this school, and I've been partly working in public transportation as well. So my concern is a little about sub-optimation. We're talking about public transportation and the urban mobility program, and that counts for, say, 15% of all the traveling in a region, and that's a very small part. And the reason why 85% are not using this is due to price and punctuality, mostly. And my concern is that we don't care about these 85% of the people. What will happen if we can say 20%, we take them on the public side, the other 80% still need their cars, still need to live, go to with their children and to work and so on. If we slow down the efficiency of those people by 3-4%, will be a catastrophe. Is there any thoughts in a study that we don't lose more than we win? If you see my point. Thank you.
Yeah, from our perspective, in our program, of course, this is something that we're well aware of course. The idea here, and I know the ambition of some public transport companies, of course, is to change those numbers. And of course, it will be interesting to see how, if that happens, of course. But I think you probably have a better answer to this than I do, Anders. Because you guys have thought
maybe. I think I touched upon it. I mean, we can expand our services, we can expand it all across the region, in all small cities and all mid-sized cities. Make public transport more available, more accessible, more higher quality, but it comes at a cost, and somebody has to pay it. So I would say investing in public transport is efficient. It creates value. It creates access to labor markets. It better match on the labor market. If you take away public transport as it is, there is a societal loss, but it doesn't mean that more and more and more is better. So I think we need better decision support in order to capture the values and the money spent for such reasons. And I agree with you, but it's important to remember that we are at a rate of, well, 30% market share of motorized transport in Skåne right now. We have an ambition to increase it to 40%, but I think we need to look at the sustainable mobility in a more wide sense to actually include walking and cycling, and that goes, for instance, primarily in the cities, but also sort of cycling, commuting. The region Skåne is now launching supercykelvägar.
Superbike pathways.
Which is taking place across Europe, actually. I mean, the Dutch example, you go to Copenhagen, you see it. So supercykelvägar is a way actually to increase cycling as a mode for commuting, and also we looked at potential. There is a potential in the span 5 to 20 kilometers. So in the future you will see more super cycle highways in Skåne.
Okay, and with that we draw the line. I think. Do you want to round this off, Sara?
See, you can hear me now. Well, thank you so much to all of you for a very interesting. And of course, many thanks to all of you in here and online for coming and listening in. And with that, let's see, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
I get one?
You also get one.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. So we have some more sandwiches and coffee outside. So those who have time, feel free to stay on and mingle, ask some questions if you are able to stay a bit. And yeah, thank you.